Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Vert, and welcome to I'll Think of a Clever Title Later, an ethnographic report on understanding the experiences of ADHD college students. This project has been ongoing for about a year and is still in progress, so what we'll be seeing today is a summary of current findings and a basic introduction to this research. I would like to begin by clearing up some misconceptions about ADHD and addressing some common questions and comments. So, what is ADHD really? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder is a mental disorder that affects the ability of an individual to focus. It is a complex disorder that affects many of the same parts of the brain as autism. It is characterized by a massive variety of larger symptoms, including, but not limited to, lack of focus in regular tasks, executive dysfunction, hyperactivity or high energy levels, and communication differences. Some symptoms may be experienced by some, but not all. This disorder is highly varied and affects everyone differently. So, does that mean we can't sit still? This is a bit of an understatement, and additionally isn't entirely accurate for all ADHD folks. There are three main presentations. Firstly, there is inattentive ADHD, which was called ADD up until the mid-2000s. Inattentive presentation ADHD is characterized by difficulty focusing on basic tasks, difficulty with short-term memory, and occasional difficulty with long-term retention of information. This is much harder to detect and is thought to affect women on a larger scale, as they are disproportionately diagnosed. Hyperactive is the more commonly diagnosed and recognized presentation. It is characterized by large amounts of energy, restless behavior, talkative behavior, and impulsiveness. The third type is combination, which, as the name implies, is a combination of hyperactive and inattentive traits. It usually has high symptom presentation and is generally a more extreme version of both inattentive and hyperactive, as the two present in conjunction with each other. For reference, combination ADHD is the type that I personally am diagnosed with. It is not uncommon to have focus issues, but what makes ADHD unique is the way it affects the brain in all aspects, and additionally the variety of symptoms provided. ADHD is a diagnosable, treatable mental disorder. There are a variety of ways to tell if one has ADHD, including gauging reactions to low-level stimulants like caffeine. But the only way to know for sure is a diagnosis by a medical professional. This usually entails a series of small tests administered in a controlled environment. While it is observable that some children grow out of ADHD, this is more likely explained by misdiagnosis or proper management of symptoms. 4.4% of adults have ADHD, whereas 11% of children are diagnosed, and around 6.6% of those children are medically treated. Young boys are most likely to be diagnosed and treated. Testing of adults is not often performed, and the average age of diagnosis is 7, which creates issues as the brain is not fully developed at this time. There are a variety of pharmaceutical treatments available, however the statement on the PowerPoint is not dramatized. The only substance known to treat ADHD is a stimulant. Many self-medicate with caffeine before diagnosis as it creates a small amount of focus. A higher power stimulant can be harnessed to treat ADHD. This means for many being given a higher level controlled amphetamine or similar stimulant such as Ritalin or Adderall. This is not a viable option for many due to the adverse effects of a stimulant on the body long term. Those with certain health conditions, comorbid mental health disorders, and those on mood stabilizers risk severe consequences if prescribed a stimulant. ADHD has a very clear association in the American consciousness, one which is not necessarily accurate. This is the results of a survey done within my study that describes symptom presentation. This is not all possible presentable symptoms, rather a list of the most extreme and/or common symptoms. As you can see, the top 3 reported within this survey are hyperfixation, fidgeting or stimming, and zoning out. However, there are more sinister symptoms, including comorbid disorders, feelings of isolation, and difficulty communicating. While the term ADHD is heard frequently, the vast majority of the American public do not truly understand the disorder or wrongfully associate it with young children. However, 4.4% of adults in the United States have ADHD. With the knowledge presented here in mind, there are many questions to be answered about the functionality of adults with such a varied and life-altering disorder. This study focuses on adults in a college environment. Formal education is one of the common struggles between both adults and children with ADHD. Half of high schoolers with ADHD drop out, and of the half that continue, less than 8% attempt higher education. Out of that 8%, 30% drop out within the first year. Beyond this, there are no significant statistics for how many will go on to receive a graduate degree. The linear structure of formal education is a difficult landscape to navigate as an ADHD individual, and while schools offer some accommodation, it appears to do little to alleviate the stresses of neurodivergent individuals. With this research, I gain an understanding about how those affected with the disorder cope within schooling accommodations despite their restrictions. I primarily studied the ADHD student body at Humboldt State with a small number of students from other schools, and for the survey I took, I allowed a wider group to participate in order to get an understandable control. Thanks to their permission and cooperation, I managed to collect their stories and methods of overcoming the disorder in order to raise awareness for the disorder and its effect. I conducted this research in order to create a clear image of what ADHD in adult students looks like and how it affects their actions, reactions, and overall learning experience. I chose to explore their relationship with education and school administration overall in order to create a clear image of the experience. In order to create a comprehensive understanding of why so many leave higher education, it is necessary to create a comprehensive understanding of how the few who pursue it survive and how the school system helps or hinders their educational development. This research also briefly focuses on the communication differentiation experienced by ADHD people, as their symptomatic presentation affects their manner of communicating with each other, with neurotypical colleagues, and with faculty. I focused my attention on people specifically diagnosed with the disorder. This included all symptoms and presentations, as both hyperactive and inattentive-based ADHD individuals are valuable to the discussion about the college experience. I suspected a majority of my subjects would be college students between the ages of 18 and 30. As far as gender demographics go, I knew it would be difficult to predict as men are diagnosed with the disorder at a disproportionately higher rate. Women and gender nonconforming individuals are often not taken seriously when it comes to their presentation of the disorder, and as a result, I wanted to remove gender from the discussion of this particular research. The only true demographic certainty was that participants must have the disorder and must have at some point been in college. I also communicated with those who have dropped out in order to understand their complaints with the system. Another interesting variety that had to be considered was the difference between those medicated and those unmedicated. As with all ethnographic study, there is a calculated risk factor. Mine included the discomfort of my subjects and, worst-case scenario, any opening of trauma. However, by providing an open conversational environment and allowing the conversation to happen naturally, I managed to avoid these consequences. Scheduling interviews with other ADHD individuals and finding a way to describe a disorder that is characterized by so many variants, especially as a person with ADHD, is a bit like herding cats. However, that only strengthens the necessity for this work. In a world that does not allow for the communication variation experienced, especially in higher education, it is imperative to have some form of explanation that can be presented in favor of those with this disorder. Interviewing students provided valuable insight on the necessity for reformation in normalizing ADHD communication and updating accommodation systems. I also gained realistic descriptions of the trauma involved in lower education for many and how it affects their reactions toward their learning environment moving forward. Most participants admitted to not having established study habits. However, upon further investigation, I found that they had their own means of retaining information. All participants showed an interest in learning and an ability to retain difficult concepts. Many, however, also communicated disinterest in school, displayed self-deprecating thoughts, and overall appeared to be struggling with the standardized means of education. One important piece for this study was notes given to me by 2 ADHD students I conducted interviews with. The idea of communication differentiation and coping in a rigid environment was supported by observing, mapping, and analyzing physical notes from individuals. This first set of notes was taken by one of my interview subjects in a long-form lecture course. Note the drawings and usage of only short key words. This second set was taken from the same student for the same long-form lecture course and contains large blank spaces. Both pages only take up about 1 page worth of information, despite the lectures being long. This page of notes was taken from another subject. The subject commented that notes are taken primarily from slide content, but not studied beyond this. These may appear standard to some, but I can assure you the differences lie below the surface. When I asked for a sample that presents general note-taking, I found that large blank spots and drawings were not uncommon. However, another method of note-taking I saw was directly mimicking what was written on the slides, with no variation or notes from in-class points. This is ineffective for studying, but both note subjects presented here commented that they do not study before exams. Rather, they hope the information that they retain in class is enough. When contrasted with some neurotypical note-taking methods, there is a clear difference, as the neurotypical notes are designed to capture a majority of discussion in class and meant to be studied at a later date. The attitude appears to be that ADHD students take notes more as a formality, a show that they are focusing on the material, whereas neurotypical students take notes for future reference. Understanding these study habits formed a fantastic bridge between my understanding of communication to my understanding of the accommodations necessary for ADHD people. The notes viewed showed that while communication and comprehension are different, ADHD students are still as capable and aware as any other students. Despite easy distractibility, many can work just as efficiently as other students through utilizing their own unique accommodations within the barriers placed on by standardized education. Many of the students I interacted with communicated anxiety about interacting with faculty and educational staff. There was a distaste expressed regarding the educational system as well as school authority figures and power structures. Pictured is a quote, unedited, taken directly from a survey conducted. The question was, how do you generally view education? The response was, learning is fun. It's great. Being forced to take classes that don't pertain to me is irritating. And dealing with the offices and college staff that do advising, financial aid, and all that stuff really makes me debate eating hot coals, so I can at least get a doctor's excuse. This is understandable when taking into consideration the amount of those interviewed who commented on trauma endured at the lower level, often starting in elementary school and on occasion going all the way through high school. Every person I interviewed had a variety of stories of teachers and faculty berating them for behavioral difficulties, communication differences, or some other pattern of behavior easily explained by ADHD. Excessive disciplinary action towards young ADHD students is not uncommon and reflects an attitude towards education. Additionally, many feel as though their needs are not being properly addressed by faculty. I found from my control group in the survey that they found it easy to study and communicate with their professors, whereas those with ADHD overwhelmingly answered that they rarely, if ever, studied, and that their communication was dependent on a faculty member's willingness to interact with them on their terms. The results of this survey show that those with ADHD who have sought disability help from their university are often dissatisfied with the accommodations given. All but one of the positive responses were from non-ADHD controls who had sought disability help for other unrelated disabilities. In the commentary at the end of the survey, as well as in my interviews, many commented on their dissatisfaction with the educational system and faculty, especially when it comes to disability education resources. This study will continue to be ongoing, as it is imperative to describe and understand what ADHD means for many to a wider audience. As noted by subjects, there is a barrier of communication between those with ADHD and neurotypical people. As a result, most subjects seem to be less open to discussing their disability with faculty members and professors. Most subjects appeared to be more open to working with other ADHD individuals, and some subjects communicated interest in participating in this project primarily as a means of gaining more awareness and understanding for the disorder. I noticed that there is an observable pattern of ADHD individuals who spend a majority of their time with other ADHD individuals. I theorize that this congregation allows for ease of communications between understanding individuals without changing patterns of speech. What has been analyzed in this study is just the beginning, as there are millions of underrepresented adults with ADHD in the United States alone, and millions more who feel isolated within the collegiate system. I leave you with a series of quotes taken from my survey. The question was, what do you wish people knew or understood about ADHD? As you can see, a general theme here is that people with ADHD just want to be seen, understood, and appreciated for the struggles that they have because of this disorder. Thank you all so much for listening. For more information on ADHD, here is a comprehensive list of articles used within this research. Or you can check out your local library for call numbers 616.858 for attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity, and 618.928 for pediatric information on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Once again, thank you so much.